this is going to taste a whole lot better than this. In today's video, I'm going to tell you why. I don't know about you, but I'd rather have one of these than a bunch of this. Well, let's first of all start with this one. All right, I'm going to open the box. Yummy. I can hardly wait. And here we go. Boy, this sure beats the grass any day of the week. This is really good, but you know, as I look at it, the box, the milk chocolate, the almonds, ice cream, all from plants. Even the stick. Now, I particularly like this kind of plant material. My friends behind me, the sheep, they'd prefer something else, like this. Now, I could probably eat it. Outside of it giving me green teeth, it doesn't do much for me. Primarily because our digestive systems are different. You see, this is very easy for us to digest because it's a little bit different. This has something very special within the plant cells. So if I were to eat this, I'd be like my woolly friends who have to have a 4-compartment stomach, called a rumen. It would also have to have millions of bacteria within it, and the whole dental structure would also be different. So that's why they're able to do it, because they found the secret about how to break down these plants. So what I'd like to do is go back to the lab, show you some plant cells, and start describing the things within that cell that make it so amazing. Plus, it'll give me a second or two to eat this. See you back in the lab. Thanks. Well, welcome back to the lab. I have some pictures I want to show you, some images that are real cells. I didn't want to really introduce you a lot of drawings because the next couple of days we'll be in the lab under the microscope, and I want you to actually understand what it is you're seeing. I'm going to first of all start with an animal cell because this is the one we're probably most familiar with. And the first thing you'll notice right off the top is this very irregular shape. Now the reason that they're irregular is because they have to be flexible, and animal cells tend to move, so we don't want a very rigid, hard kind of the surface. Where this is a little bit more flexible and a little bit more mushy, if you will, so that it kind of gives away a little bit. So that's the animal cell. Also notice how large the nucleus is in comparison to the rest of the cell. Now this is the one we're going to be studying quite a bit, is of course the plant cell. And the first thing you should probably notice about this is that it is very, very rigid. It has a very definite shape. And it tends to be more blocky and rectangular. And that's because of the cell wall we'll talk about later. But the cell wall gives it a certain amount of rigidity. It also allows for much larger size. It also, because it doesn't break down quite as easily, it has a bit longer lifespan. And it just makes it, like for instance, a little bit more difficult for us to digest it as well, and we'll talk more about that. But the other thing that you'll notice in these particular cells are these little round things. These are called vacuoles. They're all over the place in plant cells. As a matter of fact, they have a greater percentage in the space than the animal cells have. So they have vacuoles as well, but they don't take as much space up like in this. They will store wastes, but primarily water, to give it a certain amount of rigidity and shape. So that's what their particular function is. Actually, water's pumped into them, kind of expand them when the water is plentiful. When it's less plentiful, it's going to be a little less rigid. So let's take a look at a couple of things, and that is the plasma membrane. So I'm going to be talking a bit about some of the other organelles you'll see even in the plants, or excuse me, in the animal cell. This first one is the plasma membrane, and the plasma membrane is a bilayer made of phosphates and our lipid tails. So it's kind of like a sandwich. So you have the polar head sticking out, the non-polar tails kind of sticking together that way, and it's lined up kind of just like one on top of another. As I said before, kind of like a sandwich. And then sometimes you'll have these proteins embedded in it, like for instance this channel protein that allows things to go in and out. So it's kind of selective. What goes in goes out. It's kind of like a protective fence with a gate in it, and you have sentinels at each side. So that's what a plasma membrane is all about. And then we have the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm in green, it's pointing to the green, and it's all of this stuff right in here. The water. It's mostly water, but there's proteins in it. And it's going to give, again, its shape. It's going to float a lot of the proteins and other things. And it's kind of the matrix in which everything's passed back and forth, back and forth. So that's the cytoplasm. So you can see it's made up of proteins, there's water, you know, and it's surrounding and kind of, it's the matrix where the organelles live in. Now the endoplasmic reticulum is where proteins are made. And these proteins, actually the RNA will take this like these streets that are lined with ribosomes. And as the RNA comes through here, they'll start to code it. And it will tell the cell how many proteins, what kind of proteins, and then it moves on to other places. So that's where the proteins are made. And then, as I said before, the ribosomes are actually the site where it decodes the RNA and takes basically the DNA code that was in the nucleus, and of course it's copied by the RNA, and it comes in, and then of course is read by the ribosomes, which makes the proteins themselves in all different shapes and sizes, depending on what the DNA told it to do. And then we have the mitochondria. It's the powerhouse of the cell. And there you go. There you have it. And the power cell, or excuse me, the power plant of the cell, yes, is a site of respiration. So it's going to make ATP, and as it makes this ATP, it's going to be stored so that it has the energy or electricity, if you will, to run the plant or run the cell. And it has a double membrane around it. All right, enough of the screeching tires. So let's move on to the next one. Now the nucleus. This is where you're going to find all the DNA and also some of the messenger RNA. But in here is all the code that's necessary, the instructions, the owner's manual, kind of like the city hall or the library where all that information is kept to be able to say when, where, and how many proteins. And so it's basically all the blueprints are listed or kept in the nucleus. And the next thing is the Golgi. Golgi is kind of overlooked. It's kind of like a bunch of sausages and squashed together. But what's really interesting that I've just, we had an opportunity, Mr. Dyer and I had an opportunity to go to the university and actually work in a lab and follow the proteins that cells make. And anyway, this right here is called a vesicle. And the vesicle is where the proteins, once they're made from the ribosomes, it comes in here, they're transported into the Golgi, and then they're packaged, kind of like UPS does, and packages these little vesicles, kind of pinched off, and these vesicles are going to be transported via the highway that's in the cell, which is the cytoskeleton, and they have these little like machines, nanomachines, that take these vesicles and literally walk them on the tightrope of the cytoskeleton to the exact location they need to be. So the vesicles get kind of pinched off right here in the Golgi, and it moves. And I'll be showing you some video that actually I took about how these proteins and where these proteins actually move. There is definitely a highway in the cell that you'll see most of them move. So it's really interesting stuff. I'll have to show you that later. So the membrane bound, they package the proteins, and they'll take it to different parts of the cell. Now, let's kind of focus on the things that are really, really different in a plant cell. And most of us, when we think of plants, we think of chlorophyll, that green stuff. And they're the things that are responsible for photosynthesis as it goes on. Now, if you take a look, you'll notice there's a bunch of these little lines right here. These are chloroplasts. Or actually, I should say, this whole thing is a chloroplast. Inside the chloroplast are the thylakoids. The thylakoids are like dishes stacked on top of each other. And that has the machinery, the thylakoids have the machinery actually to make photosynthesis happen. And when you get a bunch of these plates packaged together, that's called a grana. And that's where all the machinery, all the work of breaking up or putting together carbon dioxide as well as water together. So it happens in the chloroplasts, which contain chlorophyll, which is made up of thylakoids, which are plates stacked together, and a unit of thylakoids called a grana. So it's able to kind of maximize or multiply its force that way. So it contains those pigments, and I've already talked about that. And that's how solar energy is so kind of like, you know, solar panels, one on top of another. Okay, these are the vacuoles I talked about. These are the other things that's kind of different about them. These vacuoles are going to store a variety of different things. One of them, of course, is water. The other thing is it's going to also salts as well as waste products, and this helps the cell kind of keep its shape. Not only is it in the cell wall, which is located right here, that I'll talk about in just a second, and this is the cell membrane. So this is the membrane, this is the cell wall. And the actual vacuoles, like I said before, tend to be much larger and hold more in the plant cell. And the cell wall, we've already seen it. It's made of lignins, hemicellulose, and cellulose. And I'll talk more about that when we actually see a couple of the ones that I want to show you as far as the slides are concerned. So this helps protect the organ. It keeps its shape. It supports. It's kind of like the skeleton. And then, of course, it's made up of, like I said, hemicellulose, pectin, lignins, and cellulose itself. So that's really what we have here. I'm going to be working in the lab, and the one thing I want you to be able to do is find all this stuff. So you'll be working with plant cells. This one is just stained. This is on just twice the power. Let's go to 4 times the power. Kind of focus it in real quick. And already you're beginning to see how important the cell wall is in its shape. And let's bring it up to 10 times the size. All right, right here, all of this right here, that is a cell wall. That's the dark stuff. That's the thing that gives it the shape. It protects it. But it's made up of several components, one of which is cellulose. Cellulose does not hydrolyze very well. In other words, when in the presence of weak acids or bases, it doesn't break apart very well. But also connected to it is hemicellulose. It does hydrolyze easily. So the hemicellulose can be broken down fairly easy. Cellulose not so much, with, again, weak acids and bases. And then the thing that connects these two together is a thing called lignin. That also is very tough to break down. They tend to be shorter in nature. Cellulose is very, very long. Hemicellulose is somewhere in between, but the lignin is really, really short. Lignin will also be found in the secondary cell walls, like for instance in woody plants, but also in the xylem of the vascular structure within the cell, which means it makes an excellent conductor of water up and down. So one of the reasons the sheep can't or can eat the grass is because they have enzymes in their bacteria, or bacteria that have enzymes that will actually break all of the lignin and hemicellulose and cellulose apart. Whereas when we eat it, the acid in our stomach isn't able to kind of break it down. So that's why ice cream bar tastes a whole lot better than the grass, is because we don't get a whole lot from it. It pretty much passes right through us. Very little digestion takes place. So that gives you kind of an opportunity idea to see what the cells look like. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you or show you. Not only is this the cell wall, but here is the nucleus, and of course the cytoplasm. So we can see the cell wall, we can see the cytoplasm, we can see the nucleus, and that's all about what you'll see. I'm going to show you some different kinds of cells that will allow us to see actually structures within the tissues. But that's for another video. I hope this has been helpful for you, and we'll see you in the lab in a couple of days. Thanks.